Hi, welcome to this session. I am Chris Hui, and I'm going to get into the book of Revelation. I've been studying it and analyzing it and praying about it, and I'm going to pray right now. God, I would like to share the model of the book of Revelation that I've come up with. I pray that you strengthen us and give us insight into understanding this book that you've gifted to us, and help me be faithful to the source material and be able to see and highlight things that are contained within the text and with the other books of the Bible, and connect and unveil some of the symbolism. Thank you, God, so much for everything you've given me. You've blessed me with so many good things, and I'm making this video in part because I want to share some of these good things, or as much of these good things, with other people. In the Lord Jesus Christ's name I pray, amen. Okay, so we're going to kind of build a model, but we have notes already as well, but we're going to treat this as a chill live stream time. It may be very short, it may be very long, we don't know, but we're going to do our best to be faithful to the book of Revelation as we've seen it. We have different graphics that we could show on our other screen, and we're trying to determine what would be the best way to approach this. So first, let's lay some ground rules. I think it'd be a good idea to figure out just exactly how are we even going to approach the book of Revelations. A book of Revelation, not Revelations. So it's ground rules. And we'll use this video to help us make a shorter video. I think that's the goal of this video. Is we've got a lot of notes, we've got a lot of images and a lot of graphics and a lot of analysis, but the book of Revelation has 22 chapters. It's probably the most challenging book in the Bible that I have come across, and I'm trying to make sense of all the research that I have completed. And I think that the first thing we want to do is understand that there are multiple models. So there are different models. People have a different idea on how to interpret the book of Revelation. So what I would say is there are multiple interpretations, and each of these interpretations can actually be presented as a model, okay? And when I think of that, I remember the story of the elephant and the blind man, because I had a chance to research other people's models, blind men. And having researched other people's models, I have come to the conclusion that this picture accurately describes it actually describes what's going on in the world of interpreting the book of Revelation. You've got different people touching different parts of the book, and they're saying it's a spear, it's a wall. And having a single unified model is our goal, right? So that we're in a world where there are multiple interpretations. We've got one source material. There's only one source material. There's a single source material, and it's creating multiple interpretations. And with the multiple interpretations, you can construct multiple models. And my goal is to come up with a single unified model. And these models should be testable and justifiable. So the models that are being presented should be approached actually with the scientific method. That's actually how I would like to approach the book of Revelations. Revelation is to approach it and say, okay, well, there's a single source material. There was a, you can even say that, take that away. With single source material, there's a single author, and then there is a single author with a single message. I believe there's a single message being sent through the single author, and when we are seeing multiple interpretations and multiple models, we don't need to be mean. We can basically say, okay, what are the strengths of this model? What are the problems with this model? So what are the strengths versus weaknesses? Or you can even say the what are strengths and weaknesses? I think strengths and weaknesses are a better way to approach it. What are the strengths and weaknesses of this model? And so I'm just going to move this here. Go. So the single source material is the book of Revelation, you could say. The single author is John of Patmos. And the question is, what is the message? I have some formatting issues that I would hopefully get rid of in the final draft of a video. So a single unified model. So what are the strengths and weaknesses? And I think we want to be actually transparent too about what are the strengths and weaknesses of the model we come up with. And I think this is a nice way to approach the book of Revelation, because instead of putting on the pressure and saying, look, I need to come out with the right interpretation of the book of Revelation, we're going to go look for the best interpretation of the book of Revelation. So we're going to look for the interpretation. So when you look at all the multiple interpretations, it's important to realize that we're not going to just straight out say this is right or this is wrong, but we're going to give we're going to let the source material speak for itself, actually, and that's really, really important. I think certain conditions we're going to be using here, and these are the guiding principles that will even help us make sense of the book of Revelation, is we're going to consider the book of Revelation to be both have divine authorship and human authorship. And so these are some assumptions we're going to make. So we're just going to be clear. Assumptions. And that there is continuity with the Holy Bible. And we're going to assume the Holy Bible is the 66 book canon. And that should be pretty good. Our approach will be that there is a let me talk about that assumption first about the divine authorship. I think it's really interesting to look at the book of Revelation and realize that it's really something special. It is a serious work. Like it's a very if John of Patmos was to give me the Book of Revelation and submit it to creative writing class, and I'm his teacher, I'd give him an A plus. But I would also ask him, what is going on in the middle? It has a high quality and literary quality, and it has captured the human imagination for thousands of years. You can't say that about that many books. And so, from a creative writing standpoint, I actually would give it a very high score. However, I would actually also say that the author himself is also confused. And this might sound surprising, but I actually think that there is enough evidence inside the Book of Revelation to suggest that John of Patmos himself was confused about the meaning of the symbols that he himself did not understand. You see him asking questions, and I find him to be a very highly intelligent author that is also faced with actually the same problem as us. He's aware there's a single message, but he doesn't actually know what that message is himself in its entirety. That's something that makes the Book of Revelation then a puzzle. So this is it's a mystery. It's a mystery because we don't know what is the single message, but it's also a puzzle because there are enough hints within the text itself that suggest that the book was designed to be understood. So when we're looking at the human authorship of John of Patmos, I'm saying that he's very high quality creative writing. However, the author is also confused, just like us. He's a spectator. And that gives us a very interesting problem because the author himself is puzzled and stuck in a mystery. And from a divine authorship standpoint, the assumption we're making is that God is the divine author. That the Book of Revelation does not mince words. It literally says Jesus is the Alpha and the Omega. So that means the assumption here is that Jesus played a significant hand in the writing of the Book of Revelation. And so we see a couple features here. Is that doesn't care about being politically correct. I mean, we see the Book of Revelation uses some pretty strong language, and you notice that there is this element of not caring about being politically correct. It makes certain parts of the Book of Revelation difficult to read in a public setting without blushing because it's just so out there. At the same time, it has a confidence about it, which is quite different than the confused aspect. When you start reading the Book of Revelation, you get this idea that John, the human author, is confused. But you get the idea that he's actually being handed a message that has supreme confidence. And that is a huge juxtaposition of the writing style. So even if, let's say, someone doesn't accept this assumption, it's really hard for them to not accept that there is this element and baked into the writing, that there is this not caring about political correctness. There is this supreme confidence about the future. There's things are spoken in a tone where it's like, it's going to be like this. This is what's going to happen when people die. This is what's going to happen to the wicked people. This is what's going to happen on Judgment Day. There's like this cadence And so the human author himself presents himself as a messenger. He's actually presenting himself as a messenger, whereas God/Jesus is presenting himself as a king. So you get this idea that you've got this human author who's a royal messenger giving a message from a king. And kings don't care about being politically correct if they are very powerful. And if you even would, I would even go so far as to say that if we want to be really honest, and this is implied. There's an implied, and it's not about not caring about being politically correct, but being politically correct, not caring about being politically correct, is somehow derived from, I'll use the wrong word, omnipotence, from the omnipotent potence. Sometimes you get potence of God. And that the supreme confidence of the future is coming from the omniscience of God. And so you've got these two factors coming in hot. We might layer in some music later, but yeah, I really have to apologize because this would be so much smoother if, in a perfect world, which I decided, look, I'm just going to do this even if it's not a perfect world, because I think there are some ideas I have that are worth spreading, but I just don't have much time, and I don't know when I'm going to have much time, and I decided, look, we're just gonna do it. I mean, I can't even find the right color of blue. Give me the right color of blue. I love teal. Teal is a very, very cool looking color on black. Oh, it looks so good. So I know things are a little bit disorganized, but we're also working through it and working through some formatting issues. So in a perfect world, these would not be on the same slide. So there's the supreme confidence about the future. And I was actually considering, should I really write a book about this? Just a short book about what I found. Might be interesting, and I may do it if that's what God would like. He didn't care about being politically correct. Supreme confidence about the future. And what is I think we see something here about high quality of creative writing. You see, I think I would say that the author appears to me to be highly educated, and interesting, just like us. So it might seem a bit strange, but you get this kind of dual authorship feeling going on, because you've got this royal messenger who's highly educated, but in every other respect he's just like us. I remember when I first read the book of Revelation, I was scared. I was creeped out. I feel that he felt the exact same way. But there's this other character in the book of Revelation, Jesus, God, the King. He is not scared, and he is not like us. And this might actually be why the book of Revelation has had such a powerful grip on the human imagination. Now, for continuity, I used to be a purist, like a purist in the sense that you can't read the book of Revelation and use other books. Like, if you're going to read a book in the Bible, you can only use that book. If you're reading the book of Matthew, you stick to the book of Matthew. Context. Right? But the truth is that being the last book written in the Bible, and literally being the last book, the 66th book of the Bible, this is the 66th book, right? Being the 66th book, it is actually in context for this book to be read in light of the rest of the 65 books. Why? Because the author of this book read a majority of these 66 books, or had access to the majority of them, and was drawing on their symbolism. And so we see that there is a symbol symbolic. I don't know if symbolic is 2 L's or 1 L. Symbolic code that is being drawn upon from the 66 books of the Bible. And arguably even more than that. But there's very clear, I think it's actually correct to understand that the book of Revelation was written for people who actually read the Bible in its pre-canonized form. And it was actually written by someone who read his Bible, and it was written using symbols directly from, say, the book of Daniel, the book of Genesis. The entire Bible was kind of the code book to draw from. And so there's a symbolic code that I would even call it a biblical symbolic code. And I think it's fair to just be blunt that these are the assumptions we're going to make. And we've justified the assumptions to some degree, but it's not possible, I think, or I've given up on the idea of fully justifying everything. There's continuities, there's I would just say, so, I mean, this is the last Bible came up. That's good enough continuity. And to understand how the book of Revelation is pieced together and what are some of the conclusions is we're going to have to draw on the biblical symbolic code. The book is full of symbols. But the symbols, and we should assume here that there's a single author. I was going to say, what should we say here? Since there's like a single message, there should theoretically be a single correct interpretation. And now that's not going to, it doesn't mean that these multiple interpretations are wrong, because perhaps these multiple interpretation model could possibly be reconciled, united. But there's an idea that maybe one person's model and interpretation is the trunk and someone else's is the tail. And I think trying to see if there's reunification is possible is one way of doing it. Okay, so we're going to move forward. I do like the idea too of, and we're not going to get too far into this, but there's this world where you take one model and you clearly define the models. It's like model 2, model 3, and then you say who believes in this, and then you figure out who believes in this, and then you say just the problems, strengths, and, or I should say, this is where you get the strengths and weaknesses going down. And I actually think the weaknesses are important because they help us refine our model. And the best interpretation should be refinable. Should be testable, refinable. And we want to be open to constantly refining and improving our model that we come up with. So we don't want to say, this is the right model and that's it. We actually want to say, this is the model we have. How can we improve it? How can we improve this? So then we're going to say, our model, we're going to say, What are our competitive advantages of our model? How can we improve it? What are the problem data points, i.e. versus? And if the idea is our model should be able to make, we want to use, our goal is to use as many verses as possible, have conflict with as few verses as possible, and unashamed and able to stand confidently with every single Bible verse. Now that's pretty tough order, but that's, in other words, the model that we're going to have should not it should adapt to fit every single Bible verse. If a single Bible verse causes it problems, this should be highlighted. We're not going to be afraid of this is a verse that doesn't fit our model. We might say, well, that means our model is not perfect. It's not a perfect model, but we should highlight whatever verse is is highlighting a problem, and then we should make a list. And then what you do is we play with even more models. So we start with what other people's models, but then we have our own model that's better, hopefully better. If it's not better, then it's not. You might as well use someone else's model, right? If your model's not better. But once we run into these problems, we can play around with other models and continue the cycle. Play around with different ideas. So like, this is another way of saying it. It's like scenario 1, scenario 2, scenario 3, and then seeing which scenarios have the highest probability or have the least problems. And it's like trying to fit together a puzzle. You just keep playing with a piece till they come together. Okay, so that's how we are going to approach, that's how our assumptions, but our approach, we are trying to be, we believe the book of Revelation is actually chronological. So what do you think is chronological over random, or let's say random flashbacks? Random flashbacks, okay. We think that where possible, literal is better than symbolic. It doesn't mean we're not going to use symbolic. It doesn't mean there aren't random flashbacks. It means that we're defaulted. So this is the default approach. And so this is what I mean about play with different models and different scenarios, is we might try a chronological, like say, let's assume it's chronological first. And if that doesn't make sense, if we have problems, let's consider the possibility that there are random flashbacks. We're going to consider this to be a literal thing, and then if that doesn't make sense, we're going to consider it to be symbolic. And we want to do as many honest, merciless, side-by-side, truth-seeking, God-loving approach. And ultimately, the model should be comprised of input, process, output, feedback. So there should actually be an output element of the model. For example, if this is our model and interpretation of the book of Revelation, what are the implications? What does this mean for people? What does it mean? And what does this mean? How does this apply? What are we predicting? Models need to have a predictability factor, and this book of Revelation talks about predicting the future. So if our model sounds good, but it fails to accurately predict the future, then it's just like in science, you could predict the future if you have a good model. If you've got a good equation that models a process, say a stock market, it should be able to predict the stock market on some level. And so what does this mean? This is how does this apply? I think this is really important. Oh, individually and for groups, I should say for individuals, for groups, and as a body of Christ. So you could say corporately as a church. And what does this mean for the world and all mankind? Because it seems to be these different layers, I think. And what are we predicting? There should actually be a score. So out of 100%, how accurate is this model? And if this model is 0% accurate, then it's garbage. And but we shouldn't be embarrassed if it's a 0% accurate model. It just means that it either means one or two things. We did not understand the text, or the text is not able to predict the future, which is a valid assumption. Our goal too then will be to first we're going to say, does the book of Rev predict the future? In other words, is it divine? Is it divine? If it's divine, it predicts the future. Did we interpret the book of Rev correctly? The single message. And so we can't actually answer the first question that easily. Does the book of Revelation predict the future? Is it divine? But we can sort of control did we interpret the book of Revelation correctly? I think this one is a doable task. We can see, were we faithful? You could say faithful to the source material, faithful to the messenger, faithful to the king. And you can even say faithful to source material, faithful to the messenger. You can even say, are we faithful to the biblical code? Because I had 4 things here, right? So you have the source material, the source material here. You have the king, the royal messenger, and the biblical symbolic code. Biblical symbolic code. So we will be grading ourselves in a couple ways, I guess. Some of these will be harder to see, like for example, are we being faithful to the king is interesting, because we actually have a lot of, in this assumption we have the character of Jesus and we have the character of God. So there's so much in the Bible that helps us get that problem done. Faithful to the messenger. This one's interesting because I have, and this is a problem or opportunity, character of John. The question is, is the Gospel of John, 1 John, 2 John, and Book of Rev, are these written by the same person? And disciple John. This will be an interesting one that I have to do more studying because I actually don't know the answer. And That would be very helpful. If it turns out that the book of Revelation is written by the same person as any of the authors of this, it gives us more material to say, hey, are we being faithful to the messenger's original message? Now, the biblical code is interesting because this gives us a character of the Bible, of the Old Testament, and character of the New Testament. So we've got 27 witnesses and we've got 39 witnesses over here. And then faithful to the source material gives us character of internally, are we being consistent with the book of Revelation? I think one of the interesting things about this is just one book. And when we first read the book of Revelation, sometimes it seems like the book doesn't make sense within itself. So we want to find and assume that this is an internally consistent, edited, that means it looks pretty polished to me, edited and polished document that internally makes sense within itself. When actually decoding symbols, one thing that we will be doing, and I know it's pretty messy, so I apologize. One we will be decoding symbols is we'll be putting unused symbols and then possible suspects. We learned this technique from one interpreter. So we have a list of unused symbols here. For example, this might be something like Mystery Babylon. And then we might have a list of possible suspects, and that might include things like the USA, and then we will say kind of treat it like a trial is selected suspect. So we can do it that way. And so we'll be able to know at any given time which symbols have we successfully or have we interpreted and how have we interpreted it. And we can't be switching on people. You know, you gotta be consistent and intelligible. And I think that's actually another thing. There's an intelligible aspect to the book of Revelation. The book was designed to be understood. It was not understood to confuse people. The problem that it seems that it wasn't intelligible was because a lot of information has now become more readily available. I think that was not readily available to even the original author, John. The suspect. Okay, so we're gonna, when we have other approaches, we'll be looking at stuff like that. Okay. Let's continue. And it's getting late. Somebody could, I'm just gonna pour it over just so that people can understand. This is my my mapping of the book of Revelation. It's quite intense. It does not fit on a single PowerPoint slide. But this is why we're going through and trying to parse. It's like, how do you present something like this? It's going vertical, it's going horizontal, it's going left, it's going right. I think it's a good idea to just sketch out. Maybe one way we should present this is we should sketch it out, then we detail it, and then we defend and have references in another place, because it gets super intense. We should also make a list of the questions, popular questions that bother people. I think one of the things about our model that we've come up with, it has good answers for many of the questions that actually bother people. And so we want to list all questions that bother people. And then if our model answers them, we'll take note. If it doesn't answer them, we'll also take note. Okay. So we're gonna just straight up snatch up the bare minimum of what I would say is the Book of Revelation to me. Okay. Great. You know, we might even look up some beautiful pictures just to make people less eyesore. Wow, some beautiful artwork been done. Wow. Wow, there's some really intense and beautiful stuff. Okay, so the Book of Revelation actually starts off with a letter to the 7 churches. So you get the 7 churches. Then it actually has an interesting situation where you have the 7 seals. But the 7th seal triggers 7 trumpets. I think we can ignore the 3 woes for now because that might just be a little bit confusing. But maybe we should keep it in there. So the 7th seal actually begins the 7 trumpets. And I would actually time it like this. So these are the 7 seals. These are the 7. The first trumpet overlaps here. And then you have the 7 bowls. And okay. So within the 7 seals, the first seal, 4 seals are actually the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. And I don't want to scare people, and actually I want to be faithful to the source material. So we're going to make some equations. The word apocalypse does not mean the end of the world. It actually means revelation. So the book of Revelation is actually called the book of the apocalypse, or the apocalypse of John. Now the word rapture actually means to be taken up. To be taken up. And so it's the same thing as being ascension. You're going up. Okay? And I do not like the phrase, the second coming of Christ, because I think, first of all, it does not come from the Bible. And, I mean, the coming part of Christ is in the Bible, but the second part seems to be an extrapolation from the data. The reason is, for example, Jesus in the Bible is said to have died and rose again, which I believe. Died and rose again. And then he came back and visited his friends. In the Gospel of John, in the very end of the chapter, we can just actually pull that up right now. Gospel of John. Last chapter. So if you just look at the last chapter of the Gospel of John, John 21. All right, here we go. So in John chapter 20, he died. He raises from the dead. He sees Mary Magdalene. Why are you crying? He appears to the disciples. Thomas sees him. Unless I see the nail marks in his hands and put my fingers where his nails were and put my hand in his side, I will not believe. Thomas says, my Lord and my God, because Jesus comes back from the dead. He says, stop doubting, believe. And then he disappears. He goes somewhere and he comes back. So he appears and disappears and appears and disappears. So if you want to count how many times that Jesus actually left the earth and then came back, so for example, his first coming, you can say, is when he was born as a baby. But then again, when he died, he left the earth and he said he's come back. And then he came back alive, so he came back. So the second time he came back, he had already come back by coming back alive. And then later on, he apparently ascends to heaven and then comes back down for 40 days and talks to people. So biblically speaking, I don't think the word second coming is a very good and accurate understanding. And it's actually probably causing more confusion because when people say the second coming of Jesus, they're referring to Jesus coming back. But it starts to diverge from the biblical record of this idea of giving a number, because Jesus can come back as many times as he wants to come back. If he's alive, he can come back 10, 20, 30 times. There's no need for a first and second. There's no need to be limited to second. And I find evidence in the Bible for him having already come back and for him to... we still look forward to his coming back, but I can't tell you definitely how many times has Jesus come to the earth. And so the word we use, or is used in the book of Revelation, I think, is parousia, which means a royal visit. I think it basically means the royal visit. I mean, check. And I think this is superior to second coming. Second coming being present. Okay, parousia means being present. Or official visit. I think official visit is the more correct term. Last time I had studied this. And so I want to highlight that the official visit of Jesus is going to be what I'm going to prefer to use, the parousia. So the four horsemen of the apocalypse, they are conquest, the white horse. All right, should actually, because they're not all named, we should actually call them by the color. Conquest, red, war, black is green is death, and black is he's unnamed. You know, I'm just going to leave him unnamed because people call him pestilence. Some people call him famine, but I don't think he's named. And we just look at pull out my Bible. I think this is Revelation 6. Revelation 6. Come, a white horse. Conquest, come. Third seal. I looked in this before his death. On the pale horse. So. so the last one's death. And black is I'm gonna call him unnamed because, like, literally, I'm just calling him nameless because he's not actually named, and some people call him famine, but I've read the verse on him a little bit more carefully, and it just doesn't. The thing is, I'll actually read his verse since we're here. Come! I looked, and there before me was a black horse. Its rider was holding a pair of scales in his hand. Then I heard what sounded like a voice among the 4 living creatures saying, "A quart of wheat for a day's wages, and 3 quarts of barley for a day's wages, and do not damage the oil and wine." So the thing is about this is, the first part, a quart of wheat for a day's wages, is supposed to be inflation. It's very expensive. But the second part, do not damage the oil and the wine, means that the price of oil and wine has not gone up. And interestingly enough, I think some people have misinterpreted and probably been a little bit, let's just say they got brainwashed by naming the horseman. They named the horseman Famine or something, and because they named the horseman Famine, they think to themselves, oh, everything's going to become expensive. But if you read this very carefully, this nameless horseman who is riding on a black horse, he is actually saying that cheap goods, and basically if you're a poor person, things are going to be expensive. But if you're rich, the luxuries of life, wine and oil, they are not going to be touched. And so there's a symbolism here that this third horseman actually symbolizes that the poor will have a hard time. Life will be very hard, but the rich will not experience famine. And that is something I think is worth. That's one possible interpretation to consider, because if that is actually the case, then we should not expect everything to be super expensive, right? Because that's not what the text is saying. Therefore, he shouldn't be named Famine, since he shouldn't be named Famine, and he shouldn't be named Pestilence. How can you name him Pestilence? I think in Heroes of Newerth, they name one of the horsemen Pestilence. I think he is. But he shouldn't be named that. And we actually come here where we have a 5th seal. So this is actually the first seal. Actually, I'm not going to put it out. I'm going to say the 4 seals equal the 4 horsemen of the 4 horsemen. I should just call them 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. Just sounds super cool. Let's be honest. It just sounds cool. So we actually get the 4 horsemen right off the bat. And it's worth knowing that, for Thorfinn, the 5th horseman, the 5th seal, is actually the martyr's cry for vengeance. Yeah. And the 6th seal So the 6th seal is super interesting. It's super interesting. I would just put the martyr's cry is seal 5. 6th seal is actually, it's quite mysterious. That's why I'll first call it. It's quite mysterious, but it's interesting because it's described in detail. And something happens here. Something happens and it's I think it's not too much of a mystery once we crack it through, but it's something that needs to be paid attention to much more carefully. That something actually occurs. Sorry about that. Something happens in this sixth seal. The sixth seal is the most important of the seals. And I would actually argue that it is coincided with this. So there's a quote in the Bible that I like where Jesus says, Jesus, do you believe this? Mirror, Martha. This is a quote that I really like. I really like this one. And if we sound tired, it's been a long day, and we just doing our best, just chilling. So be merciful. I pray. So this is from I guess John 11. I find these verses to be very important. I am the resurrection, I am the life. Everyone who believes in me will have life, even if they die. Interesting, okay? And everyone who lives and believes in me will never... Oh, I don't like, I think the original. Right, let me hold on. John 11. I don't think there's a really... The word will never really die, I don't think that's even there. So, die. I think there's a huge difference when you look at it from this verse. The one who believes in me will live, even though they die, and whoever lives... Is this... or what did they use? I'm trying to see. For some reason, the version that I read was so more clear. But I'm just now wondering what version did I have? What had I even read? I guess this is where things can get a little spicy because people have different versions, and since they have different versions, they're going to come up with slightly different wording, and so it would need to go back to the basics. I wanted to look for the movie. Gospel of John movie, which I found their translation to be very good. American Bibles. John 11, 25, 26. So I'm going to actually, this is where we should get 26 original. We should actually look at the original language because original, we shouldn't force data to fit our thing. He said to her, Jesus, I am the resurrection and the life. The one believing in me, even if he should die, he will live. Okay. I'm going to take this super literal. Take this super literal. Said to her, Jesus, I am the resurrection and the life. The one believing in me, even if he should die, he will live. He will live. Okay. Uh-oh. Uh-oh. Okay. Let me try that again. I definitely was typing on something that I shouldn't have typed on. Okay. Okay. All right. Said to her, Jesus, I am the resurrection and the life. The one believing in me, even if he should die, he will live. Okay? And everyone living and believing in me never know. Ooh, man. What happens if you combine these? Adjective, how could... How do you reconcile that? Never not shall die to the age. Believe this. Okay. We've got a problem. But that, it's okay. Problems are exciting. And that is, said to her, Jesus, I am the resurrection and life. The one believing in me, if he should die, he will live. Never not shall die. I'm going to look into that more. John 11:26. Okay, so we're going to put this in our problem. These are our problem question. We thought it would be good to prove our point, but okay. I'm just going to share our model's understanding of this. So the way we understand this is John 11:26. 25:26. So this is the translation that I had read. So we're gonna definitely have to tag this and just test it. We're of course okay to test it, but this is, I thought there was something so important on this verse, and I still believe it's important. I just don't know original Greek, so I'd have to figure out. So to me, why did I want to bring up this and actually digress is there seems to me to be two separate populations talked about by Jesus in this sense. If you look closely, so Jesus said to her, I am the resurrection and the life. Those who believe in me will live even though they die. To me, this is population 1 that dies. And all those who live and believe in me will never die. To me, this is a population 2. It actually seems to hint that there will be some people who die, but they will live because they believe in Jesus. So they die and then they live. So population 1, I should actually write this off on the side maybe. Ooh. Population 1 believes in Jesus, dies, and then lives. Population number 2 believes in Jesus, lives, and they never die. Interesting, huh? And I think that this is critical to understanding what happens in the sixth seal. As we look at the book of Revelation, it's chapter 6, 7. Chapter 6 and chapter 7. Chapter 6. Six through 7 is the sixth seal. And what we understand to happen here at the sixth seal is that there's a group of people who are alive and they believe in Jesus and they never die because they're taken straight away to heaven. So they literally become immortal. You can say they become immortal. Both populations become immortal, but one of them dies and therefore resurrects and then lives. So you can say that there's a difference between these two populations that are described by Jesus. And one population experiences resurrection, whereas the other one does not. So this is the critical difference. So all those who live and believe in me will never die. So if you never die, the key word here is never. And the key word here is resurrection. So that means resurrection is tied with this color. That I am the resurrection. Those who believe in me live even though they die. They resurrect. This is the key. But this group does not experience resurrection. And all those, so this is like other group, there's no resurrection here. And how come there's no resurrection? Well, let's look at seal 6. And we'll take a break soon. Could always start up and restart this as we complete our own model. So and the critical part that I'm going to draw to here, I should actually put this on another slide because some of these things are getting tense. Revelation. I think it's interesting. Like, for example, we were talking about if the Gospel of John was actually written by whoever wrote the book of Revelation, then you're going to see that there must be a connection. After this. This is one of my favorite verses. Revelation chapter 7. Revelation chapter 7, 9. But we're going to snip it because this is kind of a significant chapter. So 7, 9. And then what else we got? Oh, so beautiful. So we were going to chop through 7 to 9, 13 to 17. So one of the big questions people have is, I'll say, 1,000 years, right? Weird to them. When is rapture? Pre-tribulation, tribulation, post-tribulation? Where are we in Revelation? When is the mark of the beast? Where is the one world of? What's interesting is I think that our model, as we're getting there, actually answers all these questions, which is pretty cool. And I think one of the questions that people are not asking that they should be asking is how many raptures are there? And then I don't even want to use the word rapture anymore. I actually want to use the word ascension, because the word ascension seems to be more consistent. We could use rapture still, but I need to check the Greek word. So what happens? Why did I highlight Revelation 7? Well, Revelation 7 basically happens. This is post 6th seal, pre 7th seal. Very important that we just highlight what this is. And you get this interesting situation. So after this, the 6th seal, this is after the 6th seal. I looked, and there before me was a great multitude that no one could count, from every nation, tribe, people, and language, standing before the throne. So these are humans. You see this language, these are human beings. And then you see the standing before the throne of the Lamb. That's in heaven. So while not exactly describing how they were taken up or what happened exactly to them, there is something that happens between seal 6 and what I would say so gotta make some room for this. So there's like a 4th seal, a 5th seal, and the 6th seal seems to have some headway. There seems to be some 6th seal happens, and it's during the 6th seal that this happens. And he says, these in white robes, who are they? Who are they? Where did they come from? And John says, this is where I fall. Sir, you know where they come from. These are the ones who came out of the Great Tribulation. They washed their robes and made them white in blood. These are the ones who came out of the Great Tribulation, who come out of the Great Tribulation. They've washed their white robes. They're white. Very important. Very important, I would say. Therefore, they're before the throne of God. Will shelter them in their presence. Let's actually focus on different colors. And shelter. Come out of the Great Tribulation. Come out of it. Never again will they hunger. Never again will they thirst. See, they're before the throne of God. The throne of God is in heaven. Never again will they hunger. Never again will they thirst. And God will wipe away every tear from their eyes. They're in heaven now. They're in heaven. These are all descriptions of heaven. Heaven. So we have here in the sixth seal the description of, I looked and before me there was a huge group of people, a large number of people. This is a population of people. And what I'm seeing, there are a population of people who are now in heaven. This is relevant. This is relevant. They came. We have the white robes. White robes. Early in Revelation, they are identified as who they are. They came out of the Great Tribulation. And they are before the throne of God. He will shelter them in their presence. Never again will they hunger. Never again will they thirst. So they're in heaven now. You have a group of people who came out of a situation. I would even actually want to highlight. They have come out. Let's use this. They have come, red would be better than yellow. Signifying that they came out of some kind of danger and he will shelter them from their presence. Wonderful. So, because they came out of the Great Tribulation, they didn't come out of death. It most certainly would appear to me that this is population 2. I should take that out. I should just put that here. You have 2 descriptions of this second population of people. They believe in Jesus, they live, and they never die, and they're immortal. Or, if we want to be accurate to the text, they believe in Jesus, they live, they never die, and they're in heaven. Then you can match that heaven and immortality are linked. The 7th seal triggers the 7 trumpets, and the 7 trumpets So we'll be continuing through this at some time, but I think this is good. Thank you, God, for helping me put together and highlight some of these verses. I think one of the important things that occurred to me once I've finished reading and analyzing this is we have been in tribulation ever since Jesus should say this. We've been in tribulation ever since Jesus left, or even before. There's a lot of evidence that this was the case, that we were in tribulation. Now the question is, the Great Tribulation versus the tribulation. Are these the same things? Because we see actually in this passage, they came out of the Great Tribulation. And I'm going to choose a picture to represent my thoughts on this. Or let's say pictures. And we're going to so these pictures are kind of scary, they're kind of sad, but I think they're relevant because they actually I should also put history is kind of important to the book of Revelation, so I should actually write something about that. History. Something about history over fiction. Some people might say, Chris, we're not in tribulation. You don't know what you're talking about. We've never been in tribulation. This does not look like anything but tribulation to me. This happened in 1622. So in this 1622, we have a situation. Well, the caption for this is that Christians God have mercy on them. These were Christians in Japan who wanted to believe in Jesus, and they were being hung upside down, and they were being put into poo, urine and piss, and they were tortured in many terrible, terrible ways. These are Christians in Japan who are being tortured and then terrified and then getting their heads chopped off. So when I ask myself, what do I think about tribulation? The word tribulation means testing or great suffering, you could say. I think it means testing, but maybe I need to look at that. But it also means suffering. And many, many people have been suffering for Jesus Christ ever since he visited here, the earth. And so, was there even a period of time where there was no tribulation in the Bible? I think the answer is actually no. I think there's always been tribulation. And so, I think these pictures prove tribulation was going on. And I want to say that I think tribulation is interesting because if we look at the countries where the Bible is banned, the number of countries where the Bible is banned, it's kind of big. So if we look at the data point where countries where the Bible is banned, it's 52 countries. There's a ban out of 52 out of 195 countries ban the Bible. What that also tells me, oh, there's also another map. Great Commission. There's a map of the Great Commission. Wow, having deja vu. Seeing this. This is a map of the Great Commission. How far has this teaching of the Bible have gone? Interesting. Kind of interesting to look at that. But I'm under the conclusion. There are terrible penalties for being a Bible holder, a Christian, or a pastor. Some penalties worse than death. And it's been this way historically for quite some time. I'm under the assumption we have been in tribulation ever since Jesus ascended. Or you could even say ever since Jesus was killed, because he was perhaps the first one who was in tribulation. So he went through it, and so it's been a continuing part of life. Believing in God in a world that's not so friendly to people who believe in God. It's kind of the price. Now, the Great Tribulation is something specific. It's like if the tribulation is a fire that's been burning, then this is kind of a flare or a volcanic eruption. Now, the interesting thing is, I think people are thinking to themselves, the Great Tribulation is somehow global and evenly distributed. They're thinking to themselves that there's going to be this one world government that basically persecutes everyone immediately. That's what I'm thinking. And this is where the elephant comes into play. I think they're half right. They're half right, because maybe a better way of looking at this is to say, let's take this bar out. Maybe we should be saying tribulation is like here, up to the sixth seal. But the Great Tribulation actually begins before the rapture and continues all the way until the parousia of Jesus Christ. Actually, it continues up to the parousia of Jesus. Like, it continues and it's stopped by the parousia of Jesus Christ. And something that I think might scare some people is I think the Great Tribulation is not evenly distributed, but it is it erupts from place to place. So what I mean by that might not make sense, is China and India and the Middle East might actually be under what you would say, biblically speaking, under Great Tribulation. So I'm of the opinion that these places are already in Great Tribulation, and it's spreading. So I think that it's something that spreads non-uniformly formally distributed. And so, for example, even logically, let's pretend that you believe in the Great Tribulation. Let's say Great Tribulation starts here. I think it could spread like this, and then it can spread like this. And if we wanted to animate that, let's see if we could do that. Let's see if we can do that. We can do that. So I'm under the opinion that we've been in tribulation since the beginning. So we were in tribulation. The Great Tribulation starts somewhere, has to start somewhere, and it has to start at some time. And then it expands. So then this part may be in Great Tribulation. I'm choosing an arbitrary spot, but just based off the data, you can see that there's a red and that there's a lot of green. So based off the data, it can go Great Tribulation, and Great Tribulation. So it grows. I think it's actually described in this way as well, because it talks about stuff how the beast makes war. And we're not there yet, but there's this idea of a growing antagonism. And so I would even say that during this tribulation period that we've experienced, it's actually experienced unequally experienced. So that means certain times and certain places have already experienced these pockets of great tribulation that, for all purposes, are pretty similar to what is coming. And this is how I actually make sense of, for example, this. Does this not look like the Great Tribulation? Then you see the Bible verse, beheaded for their testimony. So like Revelation 24. So if you just read this Bible verse, for example, and I saw thrones that let's use a more modern translation. This is not NIV. Oh, come on guys, we got this. And I saw thrones. I mean, he wrote this. This was written in circa 95 AD, and if you just look at the years, that's 1622 minus 95 is equal to what? It's like 1,500 years later. So it's been some time. It's 1,152, 1,527 years later, and you see that you get this idea. I saw thrones on which were seated those who had been given authority to judge. I saw the souls of those who had been beheaded because of their testimony about Jesus. Word of God. Does this not describe them? I mean, this totally describes them. And I saw the souls of those who had been beheaded because of their testimony about Jesus and because of the word of God. These people were beheaded because of the testimony of Jesus. These people were treated this way because they would not. They weren't going to say. They wanted to die as Christians. They wanted to die believing Jesus. So I'm pretty sure that based off the data point, if we were going to get into years, 1622 Japan was a time and a place of great tribulation. So we get, so it's a time and a place. And since it's 1,500, and let's just put it back here so that, and so for us, realistically speaking, I would actually say 2021 now we're actually on this node right here. We're on this node. The reason why I just randomly have 4 great tribulations, there's no real significance, just to show that it's kind of unequally experienced. They flare up, they flare down. So for example, Japan may not be in great tribulation anymore, but it definitely was in 1622. And for example, I'm in America right now. It is not under great tribulation, but there are other places in 2021 that are experiencing things that are equal to or worse than 1622, potentially. I've heard some reports that would suggest that being the case. And the interesting thing is that these Seal 4 and Seal 5 is history, as in it's already done. Seal 1 through 4 is the 4 horsemen of apocalypse. Seal 5 is the seal of the martyrs. It is also done, which literally means that I might have to shift this all over again. You could see that the martyrs were crying in 1622. I mean, I am crying for them too. Like, I am crying by looking at their pictures in my heart. And I would say that what's interesting is we're actually wanted to post, this is future, not yet done. So the 6th seal and the ascension of the church are things not yet done. So we're actually sitting quite snugly between seals 1 through 5, done. We're living in the 5th seal, so to speak. I think that's the right way to say it, is that we are you could even say the present is right now. From the book of Revelation's perspective, and just my best modeling capabilities is telling me that, and from what I have learned from other people, we're right here. So we might want to put a red bar right here, because I think it surprises some people to realize, what? Are you saying that we're in the Great Tribulation now? I think if you went to certain countries, you'd say yes. Are you saying that seals 1 through 4 are done? They're not done. They're ongoing. And see, so these are ongoing. And you say seals 5. I think this is an ongoing action. And so we've got a pretty exciting look at this. We'll love to link some of these events which are on our timeline to some of the amazing Jewish holidays. I think I'm gonna best to make a slide off that. Oops. Duplicate. I'm going to delete these so I could have so off of the top of my head, Feast of Weeks. Unleavened bread, the Feast of Unleavened Bread. which includes Passover, Feast of First Fruits, Feast of Trumpets, Feast of Tabernacles, Day of Atonement, Purim, Hanukkah. I think this is there's a lot of symbolism here, and I'm really excited to find out about this. It's pretty much impossible if it wasn't for the internet age and so many great scholars and great people who shared their ideas and their understanding, so we'd probably get into that. But to me, the Feast of Trumpets, I'm just going to just quickly do this. I know we gotta go eat something. Feast of Trumpets has something to do with the ascension of the church. The Day of Atonement has the Day of the Lord, which Hanukkah has something to do with the New Jerusalem. Purim has something to do with the white throne judgment. The Feast of Tabernacles has something to do with the Messianic millennium. Let's check that out. The Messianic millennium. And if we're gonna go, might as well try to fill this one out. So Beast. I should probably move all my other slides here so we can work through it. So crucifixion, Feast of First Fruits, resurrection, Feast of Weeks has something to do. Pentecost. Let's do birth of the church, crucifixion, It's really funny because from this model, I need to look into research this more, but I am not completely sold on this connection yet. I still need to understand this more. But for some reason, I'm way more sold on the connection between the latter part of the model. So this part is still kind of finicky, even though for other people they're very certain of this, and they're not so certain about this stuff. We're gonna take care. God bless, and thank you for watching. You're always welcome. Bye bye. It's been fun, and God bless. I want to pray before I go. Thank you, God, for this model. Thank you for today. I'm excited for you to come. Thank you for the focus. I pray you keep me productive and keep me honest and humble. It would keep me sharing and peaceful, keep me knowledgeable, grow me in knowledge, grow me in humility. I want the fruit of the Spirit: love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness. Help me put on the helmet of salvation, the breastplate of righteousness, the belt of truth, the sandals of the peace of the gospel, the sword of the Spirit, and the shield of faith. And thank you so much for Christian rappers, Christian authors. Thank you for scientists. Thank you for non-Christians too. You know, non-Christians are helpful. I research Jewish writings as well. I know there's problems in Palestine right now between Hamas, the Jewish people, Israel, and the Muslim community. It's getting tense. You know, Lord, your will be done, but I pray for mercy on the innocent. I pray for peace and love and joy, and we're looking forward to your return. God bless. God bless this land and God bless this earth. We can't wait for your renewal. This world needs a patch update. It needs to have a restart button because we're starting to get very trolly. I pray all these things in the Lord Jesus Christ's name I pray. Amen.